thanks. So yeah, one note, I will have to leave probably in 40 minutes or so. So agenda for today, I posted on Zoom, just any old business and just quick check in on. So I saw that Zulip thread. So thank you for that. I think that's a good place to get started. If we have, obviously we're working on this with ourselves, but I was also thinking potentially some agenda items for a broader discussion. I know Graham, you're involved in this pretty heavily as well. So let's just keep that as that gets closer. So particularly about questions from the OMOP side, what they might have in relation to SQL and FHIR. So it's good. Yeah. So we'll set up those calls. Ryan, who is not here, I think at the moment, we wanted to have a conversation around this idea about intents in the view definition, shareable, that sort of thing. We didn't actually talk about it last time, so hopefully Ryan might join. Well, maybe we can restart that. I did not move the glossary to Google Doc or get any chance to work on the spec work, so that's where I'm at. And probably same with Ryan. I didn't see any progress on that. So we'll just keep those agenda items going. Any other old business or additions to the agenda?
I think Igor and Max can report what they did with the tests.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sounds good.
I'm pushing like a doc for how to implement tests. It's a first draft. I run it through ChatGPT. English is better, so yeah, I will just push it in a couple of minutes.
Yeah,
I think the huge topic which we definitely should discuss, I don't know, maybe in a bigger group, that the use case which Graham brings to us, and I think it is important. Should we allow multi-resource type view definitions? So as implementer, we always repeat it as a mantra, so that it should be restricted to one resource type. But when I was thinking, so there is no reason. I don't see any obvious reason why we're limiting themselves, and this is a very valid scenario, like for OMOP, not only when you mapping different resource types into the same view. So it sounds very natural, and okay. So I think this is the biggest topic we can discuss today.
Yeah, I had it in there. It's the desired output structure one. I didn't formalize the whole conversation, but yeah, I think that's a good place to start. Just a couple of other housekeeping items. If you haven't voted on the polls yet, two scheduling polls, please do so. I know there's some outstanding question threads, so please take a look at those. Since we don't have Ryan and the whole group, maybe we'll continue to skip over this idea of shareable profiles. And yeah, let's just start there. I think we have enough of the group to at least get a sense of where folks are at with that.
So just before we start, I had another item that we could possibly add. Maybe we'll not get to it, but the more discussion on the roles. So like the validation, can I run this, infer the schema from the definition?
Oh yeah, certainly. I like that. Did I not put that one in there? Oh, it's funny. I think I missed that one as well. But yeah, certainly. Let me put that on the list, John, because that's something we should certainly dive into. So I'm going to say inferring schema from view definition.
I think Josh usually join us a little bit later. So maybe we can start from test report from Max and Igor, and then go to this big topic when probably Josh will join us.
He just said he wouldn't be able to join.
He wouldn't be. Okay, that's it. Okay.
But at least we can get a start on that. Yeah. So Max, Igor, do you want to give an update on the test infrastructure? I don't know if you have anything to share. You want to show?
I don't know if I want to share something. So as a report, we were able to invest some time today and in this week. So first, we added a lot of tests for a different combination of expression. So it's now is a test for each with union, all with column, and so on. So we tried to come up with the most realistic and unrealistic one. I don't know yet how to characterize the tests. So real cases are separated from all possible tests in syntaxes, but at least we added them all right now. And second important part is that we are now trying to make discussion related to test cases in issue. I added badges to issue we wanted to discuss. I don't know if we want to discuss it right now here, or I just invite you to issue to GitHub to place where we could
And the
discuss
Max,
them.
we usually, when we post the issue, we like mirror it into Zulip chat. So because some people are tracking Zulip, not GitHub. So if you can like duplicate it in a Zulip chat, that would be nice as a separate topic.
Okay, so especially when I really expect your opinion on some questions. So for test, the important question for me right now is your thought on how to test resource key and reference key function from FHIR schema. Because it's not work very well with syntaxes we have. I also added example and my thoughts on this an issue. So I don't know, should we discuss it now, or I will just post a link on this to Zulip and we could discuss it.
In my opinion, we should have a quick discussion about it in the interest of like swarming on finishing off the current version of the spec. I think there's about 3 things that we should cover, and they are sort of quite important, I think. Yeah, the first one is, how do we test the get resource key, get reference key thing, and how do we test it? You know, I quite liked your example, Max, of just sort of, which is a little bit of a hack, but just doing a test on a self-referential one within the same resource. The problem with adding like additional sort of syntax and functionality to the tests is it's not a trivial addition. It requires us to like add new things and have multiple different resource types and everything within the test data. So I think, in my opinion, we should either do something simple like what you've done, Max, or omit that part of the test for now. I think it would be good potentially to have some more sophisticated way of testing it, maybe later, but I don't think it's a trivial addition. What do others think?
So yeah, here is example what we're talking about. So how to test that resource key and reference key is returning the same result, but without like digging in implementation details, not to check the actual value returned by these functions. So my first option was to create a self-reference resource, and now we could use a FHIR path expression to test this, or to add additional syntax, which I don't like very much.
I think we can start with this hack of like comparing in FHIR, because I'm pretty sure that we should somehow test it and have it in conformance test. So, and unless this hack will work, so let's do it this way. When we find that it could not cover some important aspects, so we can invent another syntax for test cases.
Is it valid FHIR resource? Good resource to do a self-reference by FHIR?
Why not?
On the line, maybe.
But for the test, I would love to cover like all possible cases up to like OOID and UUID.
I mean, I think I'll throw it out to the group, but you know, that is a path forward to use the option number 1 here, checks with FHIR, and then I would just suggest, you know, in the test description, this GitHub ticket, so you know, potentially people looking at it in the future can see what the other ideas were, and then just move on from there. I think I don't really have a strong opinion on, you know, I haven't looked at it closely, so, but I'm good with that. John, you had 2 other points.
Yeah, moving right along. The other one is column ordering.
Okay.
So oh yeah, did you want to? Yeah, is that the
yeah,
one?
I'm just sharing the example. Do you see my screen actually? Because I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is this the one? No, this is a different one. I think.
Yeah.
I think we
Okay.
already discussed column ordering, no?
Well, the problem is I think maybe we didn't think about something.
Okay.
So the way we've done it is we have in our expectations JavaScript, an array of JavaScript objects, one for each row. But I think that at least in JSON, an object, the keys are not necessarily ordered. So we're kind of running the gauntlet there in terms of whether we shouldn't really be assigning an order to the keys, I don't think.
Yes.
So probably the proper way to do it is what Max is suggesting there, because otherwise we're relying on parsers to sort of preserve this ordering of the keys, whereas I think technically they really don't have to.
I don't like personally.
Don't rely on that.
Sorry, Graham, say that again.
Many parsers do not maintain the order. Most even. So you can't rely on the order of the keys.
Another option could be like, as we discussed, like CSV mode, where the output could be just an array without columns. Yes.
Yeah, the tests using JSON, and that mostly work. So it would be better if they had an array of values rather than a key pair of values. That's what you're saying, right, John?
Yeah, I think the two options are or an array of arrays, like because the way we've got it, I don't think is deterministic. I think the array of arrays is fine because we've already sort of but I think it does just thinking about I think it does need to change from what it is, unfortunately.
But that's raises another good question which Graham said. Do we really want to force keep the ordering, or it's an extra feature which can be like done as a separate case, test case with an array of arrays, and the rest can be done with the JSON objects. So
well, even if you say that there is a correct order and then you say what that correct order is in a JSON test, it's up to people whether they actually check the order in their implementation of the test framework.
But the question, I don't know, guys, what do you think?
It should be should order. Should order is right.
I can explain, because if we don't must order, so then I think the test as an array of JSON object is okay, because it's easy for others to implement. It doesn't depend on an order, and we may have a special test case for order for implementation which do support ordering.
Why? It's better to have a test case that says what the order is and let people choose whether to enforce it or not, than to clone the test cases for getting order correct. If you say that order is a should, then you should test that. If you say order probably not, then sure, don't test it. Or have the test support it. Just because the test's output says what the correct order is, doesn't mean that test implementations need to actually test it. It does make it more complex, yes.
Yeah, but I mean, let's imagine I'm doing implementation. I don't want to support an order. So, and as we discussed at the test, our test cases should help people to implement the specification. And that if all our tests will like support the order, then it's not very useful for the guy who is trying to implement this stuff.
It's not very hard to take an array of named things instead of a key set of key pairs. It's not that difficult.
Okay, John, turn.
So one of the considerations I think in not requiring column ordering is that this could be used to output to formats like CSV, where it's very common for people to just rely on column sort of index to do stuff. So it might actually make it more complicated if we don't require column ordering. So I think we have discussed this before, and we've sort of we do have it in the spec, a methodology for figuring out the column order, and the row order is undefined, like you can be tolerant to any row order. I think if we said it that you don't have to order the columns, it might make querying it in certain contexts more tricky, I think.
But we can as well, we discussed it like two modes. One mode could be called CSV mode, and in the CSV mode, we can like require order. And if implementation do support CSV mode, so then, we can like create test case for CSV mode.
So when you write a test case, you've got to specify two outputs, a JSON output and a CSV output.
That's good point. Yeah, that's good point. We can do this as well. Yeah.
Question: If I remember correctly, and I may not remember correctly, but wasn't the column ordering discussion came up because of union all? Or are we just talking about column ordering and outputs generally?
I think it's more related to CSV output or CSV-like output, because then people may want to use the columns order.
But I think, Arjun, that's a good point. Like, we're also talking about like merging the results of multiple view definition executions and that sort of thing. That would probably be if the columns were ordered, depending on how you're doing that, I guess.
It's FHIR.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, that's actually like Arjun's point is actually a good point. So why shouldn't it be like a must, like the column ordering? Because I think the implementations need to enforce ordering to support like unions. So then maybe we can just make it like a must, and then, that's the end of the discussion. We always enforce the order.
If we abstract away like the type of result, yes, so and that's what we did. So we are not like dictating what result should be. Is it like, I don't know, Parquet file, CSV, or JSON? So yeah, I don't know. So it is not related to this question from my point of view. So it could be different formats for output. Some of these formats are sensitive to order. Yeah, let's say like CSV. Like some of them are not. Yeah, even like blame at Parquet is like CSV mode sensitive to the order.
Correct. Yeah. But what I'm saying is that, in the context of testing, because, we are basically asking the implementation to return like a JSON object, which is not required. Let's say if I was implementing like a Parquet implementation, it was not required.
Yeah.
Because we are enforcing that, then probably we can say that, by the way, you have to have returned the right order of columns as well. So, I mean, these are all on top of the implementation that you have, which doesn't necessarily need to even support like JSON output. But if you want the test to pass, you have to do that. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I see. Yeah, but if your implementation, let's say, really produce CSV mode, yes, but for tests you are turning the CSV mode into JSON and you are passing tests, yes, and that's okay. I think even if you don't preserve how we treat the ordering in a spec, like is it may, should, shall, must. So if we decide that it must, so okay, so then we should write tests in both, like CSV and JSON. Or if it's may, I don't know, we can write one case for ordered result.
So I think the problem, as you said, the problem is that in the spec, like in the view definition spec, we don't get into the details of how the output is going to be presented, right? So I guess, I mean, that question is in some way not relevant to the current spec, because we don't get into the discussion of the output form. But it's like a must, should, or whatever in the context of test, which is outside the spec. So I guess in that context, like, I mean, if you want to pass this test, then you must preserve the order. And that's how, and the test, the expectation can be written in a way that the order, the order matters basically. So you see what I mean? I mean, it's outside the spec, but it's enforced in tests.
Yeah, but then it sounds strange for me. So because if people have to like transform their result, even if it's ordered into JSON, and JSON doesn't need to preserve order, so and test can test everything without ordering, that's okay for me. I think so. What's the problem? So why we should like enforce in a test the ordering if we are not requiring ordering, and the most implementation already transformed it into JSON, so and it can be tested without ordering. Yeah, so why we should like force all the tests preserve the ordering? So I don't know.
Yeah, I see your point. Yeah,
because if they output as a JSON, we can compare the JSON objects. Yes. So why we should, if it's not must feature in a spec, why we should force it in a test?
Well, the question is, if the tests are going to support ordering, so you can, not that you have to, but even if you can, then there has to be a test output that specifies the correct order. And so then the question is whether you're going to force the work onto the test author to do the output twice, and therefore only be able to author tests if you have both scenarios. Well, they pretty much can only author test if you're ordering anyway. Or whether you're going to say only one output, and it's up to the test framework developer to ignore the order and use a more complex matching of, right? That's the choice you make.
Yeah, but the other choice is like because we're talking about relaxing it in the spec itself. So there's also another choice there about where the burden goes to, but for the column ordering. So do we force implementations to do column ordering, or do we not do it? And then there's arguably potentially some sort of burden, even if it's only a mental burden, on some users of the extracts or results from those executions.
I mean, one thing that's I'm assuming, which maybe Nikolai's not, is that the JSON output specified in the tests is a JSON output purely for the benefit of the tests, not a general purpose JSON output, because I don't care about that, but maybe I'm wrong about that, in which case maybe it's right, because you don't want to impose ordered JSON output on the general JSON output of a JSON test runner, view runner. I'm only thinking of in tests. But in general, there's test implementations where order is irrelevant. Sorry, view definition runner implementations where order is irrelevant. And there's others where order is engineeringly useful. And then there's others like CSV where anybody who uses CSV offset should be hammered and suffer, is my view. But I don't think there's two different things you could choose then, John, because you could say we care about order where the view runner has an order and you have to get the order right if there's a meaningful order, or we can say that we just care about order in principle. They're not quite the same thing, right?
Yeah, I can bring another point. Yes, so the last time, maybe one before, we discussed that we relax on order of rows. Yes, just to be like, how to say, concise.
The order of the rows matters.
It matters, yes, but then we decided if, let's say, John implementation doesn't produce it in order, so this is not most valuable stuff we should force and like say that the puzzling doesn't like implement spec completely. Like
Well, you could have a multi-threaded, view runner that's going and selecting things, multi-thread, so your row order gets out of sync.
and that's okay because like I don't know, the algebra, relational algebra, it is a set, it is not collections.
I might have missed that discussion because I probably would have remembered it, but I think we have, I don't think we have a consensus here. We have outlined a number of different options and, definitely want to get other people's opinions here. What would be a good way to move forward? I think potentially
let's do it in Zulip, like follow
Yeah.
this discussion, and maybe next meeting we can vote or discuss together.
Yeah, we might want to do that's what I was thinking. Maybe a poll, like a Zulip poll. I'll note down a to-do for that. Nikolai, do you want to take on the task of writing that up?
I think Max will do this. He started this
Okay.
this way.
I just want to do it. All right. So to do for Max to write up a thread in Zulip that describes the different options, and then let's have that conversation go. And then if it makes sense to have a poll, we can have a poll there, like we did with some of the naming conventions, I think. Okay, great. Still on John. John had a number 3. Oh, I'm sorry, Angelo.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask the group on that topic before we leave it. Would there be any value to looking in the ANSI standard for SQL and seeing what their recommendation, because they've gone through this too. And I'm just thinking our end users are going to care about that because they're going to be used to that. Would it make sense to consider that? I think I already know what it is, but we should do some research, I think, and include it in that topic and just review that. Or do you guys think it's kind of too different? We're too different to.
If you can support with some logic, yes. So what we're expecting that the like auditory is SQL aware guys, yes. So database guys. So if it's like common sense for SQL guys, and you can bring like.
Thanks for that. John, number 3.
Okay, so the other one is indexer expressions. So we've got a whole bunch of tests that use the index operation, but we haven't actually included that in our FHIR path subset. Do we want to? Is there a use case for it beyond testing, etc.?
Yeah, I added this because for me, like index expression is equivalent to like getting element by name. So like the same expressive power. And I think that this is a specification bug that we don't have index expression in our like FHIR path subset.
What are we talking about with index expression?
It's addressing array elements by index, like square brackets and number.
And FHIR path expression.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't have it in the subset.
Yeah, we forgot. I think we just forgot because it's for me it's the same level like addressing element by name.
Just looking here at the feature list. So we just missed array indexing in the FHIR path expression set.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
But we missed like.
Got it. Okay, I think that's probably going to be not too controversial. Should we maybe just post a query about that on Zulip just to get a double check? Okay, sounds good. I'll make that a to-do. John, you suggested it, so I think that makes you the thread author. So I think it could be a short one. Does that sound good?
Actually, it also was part of the issue, so I may do both.
Okay, great.
Yeah, actually, one more topic, if I'm correct, and it's related to where that path expression. Also, let me share my screen. It will be easy to explain. So, question is related to actually this phrase the result of expression must be a type of Boolean in where pass expression. So my question is how to treat this. Is empty list returned by FHIR pass expression should be treated as false, or it should be throw an error in this case? So I put example in where I have ability to write expression desist of type Boolean equal true, and how we should treat the case when desist Boolean is absent from the resource. So right now, like if the result is not true or false, our implementation throws an error in this case. And as I understand, it's actually how it should work for, it's actually how it's described in specification, but maybe we should treat empty value as a false value. What is your consideration on this?
Perhaps we should change it so that like the value needs to be equal to true, which is different to like it needs to be Boolean, because I think there's lots of cases in FHIR where it could be an empty collection. And I think in those situations, we would not want it to be interpreted as true. Does that make sense?
No, I mean, an empty collection is evaluates to false. But if you go back to your test case, Maxim, in the test case there, I would say that it shouldn't be an error but a warning. Because the author might know that deceased will always be populated. You don't know that. Your engine can't know that, but the data might always be true. And so I always just give them a warning saying you're assuming that deceased is always populated rather than an error.
Yeah, but like you could insist on writing FHIR pass expression in such a way that it's always returned true or false. But I didn't see any requirement in this. It's like only complicating things. So
right, as you say, you could always force everybody to do that, but typical authors, my experience is, they'll bitch at me because they know that it's true and they don't want to have the extra complexity in their syntax. It's just my opinion. But the result of the expression, that's a runtime requirement, not a compile time requirement. That's how I understand that spec there.
yeah, so looks like everybody agree on this.
So Max, would you mind just saying back your understanding of what we've landed on?
We landed that if so for example, this value will return empty result if no field is present in the resource, and it will be out of the result, but it still will not produce an error.
So if you want truthy, do we sort of say like, because there's like a two Boolean like function in FHIR which kind of implements truthy. Do we use something like that?
Okay, so we like have three options here. First is strict mode, where we require to the value to return the true, well, the Boolean result, and if not, it will should throw an error, and the error will be at runtime. Second option is that we expect true or false or empty result, and false and empty result is both not produce an error, but just throw away the result from the row from the result. And third option is that we expect any truthy value for the row to be in the result. What option do we choose?
I think it's a complicated question. No time to think.
I know.
Yeah, it should possibly be a Zulip, I think, just so
Yeah.
that we can see it all.
Like if we'll go through like SQL way, then it should be true or false. Yeah, it should be Boolean. So most of database implementation required it to be Boolean. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think Bashir's thumbs up. Yes, I do think this should also be a Zulip thread so we can see next to each other the potential different options. So I'm going to put that down as a to-do for you, Max.
Okay,
That's hard.
All right.
Yeah.
that's the questions I have for today.
All right.
That's good. That's what we were thinking. When you start writing index tests, you're getting so many questions. You know,
Yeah, actually,
like
I
writing.
have a lot of them, but I need to.
Okay.
Yeah, I second that. This is great. I mean, this is making, all of the, side things that we may have missed, just making sure that, they are covered. This is great.
Yeah. Terrific. I will have to go in a minute, but we only have about a little over 15 minutes left. I don't know if we want to, what can we start next? Any suggestions?
I would love to start this, like at least listen the opinion. Should we support multi-resource type view definitions or not? Because this is kind of important decision, I think. So
yeah, this won't be resolved, but yeah, certainly we can kick it off.
from my point of view, I do not see why we don't.
Sorry, I am not sure if I know the context. Is it possible, like in maybe 2 minutes, just provide the context of why?
Yeah, so the Graham bring the problem from OMOP FHIR to OMOP mapping. When we want to map, like let's say, medication statement and medication prescription into the same view. And now there's a question. So how to do this? We can create like two views for medication statement and medication prescription, and then combine it somehow outside of view definition framework. Or we may have a view definition which can like handle two resource types, probably with the different branches of evaluation, or 5 or 6. So I mean multiple. And we always like repeat as a mantra that one view definition per resource type, but we never like exercised why. Yeah, and I think that this moment has come. We should think it again, because from my point of view, like having view definition for multiple resource type sounds very good, because other options looks not so good. If like two view definitions for the different resource type with the same name of what, how to combine, so we're losing, and this sounds very like requirement. I want to map like medication X to medication view or patient.
I'm not sure whose hand was up first, John. I think it was yours.
I think John, yeah, but I think everybody.
Yeah. I think there are some good reasons why not. And as somebody who's actually implemented this, I think one of the reasons is that joining is complicated. There's lots of different types of joining and logic you might apply to joining, and we're risking rebuilding sort of generic functionality that already exists in people's tooling and environments. So rewinding back to the original discussion on this, and I think why we landed on this, is that we thought it was better to keep this spec really simple and thin to differentiate it from, especially from other sort of solutions, and handle all the FHIR stuff, spit out something super simple that can be handled by any tooling. And all the different types of tooling already have ways of joining these things that are already familiar to people. And that's why we've implemented things like get resource key and get reference key, so that
why do you call it joining, John? Because it's not joining, it's union. We are not talking about joining. There is no if view definition like working for multiple resource types. It is union. That means that you run the same view definition on let's say two different stream of resource types, and then you union the results. So this is not joining.
Sorry, how do you know which one should go with which one? There should
let's say it's explicit in the view definition. You say that this view definition works for two resource types, this select, and for these resource types it applies another select, or as Josh suggested, like the union. And this is not join operation, this is union operation. Combining two streams like from different resource types into one view definition, like view result. This is not.
So maybe it would be helpful, like, have you got sort of an example like of where this would be useful that you could talk us through?
Yeah. Let's say so. I want medication view, and the medication can be in medication statement and medication prescription. But I won't have them in one, let's say, my medication view, and I only like picking the important information. Yeah, let's say medication code, some time, and that's all. Yes, and and I want the unified view. And the same, the problem when you're trying to map like FHIR to OMOP, yes? So FHIR may have multiple resources which are coming to one OMOP table. So, and that's the case. So you can create, let's say, two different views and then union them behind the scene, like. But if we're talking about like bulk export scenarios, like FHIR service scenarios, then from my point of view, having this view definition which explicitly say I will work for two different or three different resource types sounds good, like sounds very better solution than having multiple views and then combining somehow them outside, or introducing another entity to combine the views. Projected into one view. Same columns. Yeah, let's say patient, person, related person, practitioner, and you just want to create like person table with all of them.
No, but are the FHIR paths the same? So for each
The
column,
FHIR pass
is
can be different for different resource types. Yes.
okay, then are we just, again, I think it's good to see an example, but then are we saying that, we are just saving a union all, like a union SQL statement? Is that all we are doing? Because it seems to me that, we even for, I basically what I wanted to say is John covered most of it, because I think it mostly when we have multiple resource types, usually people think about like a join context, but in this particular scenario that you're talking about, it seems to me that, we will have the two views, because these 5 columns for patient, which have different, and then you just, put them together in a view definition.
Yeah.
And to me, it's not that much extra work if you separate these 5 into its own view definition, these 5 into own view definition, and then you just have a union that you do in your SQL, that you union these 2 tables together. So you see what I mean? Like,
I see. That was the first reaction of Josh and me. But then when you start about other scenarios, as I said, like view definition for bulk expert, or the view definition for FHIR server, then you understand that keeping them together is good, because logically you're defining one view on top of 2 or 3 or 4 resource types. And okay, you can separate and define 4 views and then somehow join, but it sounds quite like natural to have it in a one place, if it's logically one view. Yes, if by design it is one view from different resources. And the OMOP mapping FHIR is a good example of it.
By the way, I think Arjun left. Nikolai, do you mind also?
Yeah, I think Angelo, then Graham, then Max, then John.
I was just thinking, taking OMOP as an example, OMOP actually can go the other direction too, right? Like one FHIR resource should be in 2 different OMOP tables. Observation is a good example, right? Stuff we would put in FHIR observations could be in an observation table in OMOP, or it could be in a lab result table. Could be in a lot of places. So then if if you're going to go the reverse direction, you'd have to figure out how to join them, union them, or whatever. I think also taking different FHIR resources could be a little more complicated, because what if they don't have the same schema, and we're trying to figure out how do you take 2 medications, but I want the date, and that's in statement, but that's not in dispense. So how do I do that? And so I think that it might, in a lot of those cases, you're going to have to build more machinery outside of this. You're going to have to do something else that's going to generate views. Like this won't get you all the way there, no matter how we kind of change the spec. So that's just my 2 cents, is that, it might be good to know.
That's a nice, easy answer, but I would try like challenge it. Yeah. Thank you. Graham?
If you're going to do union within a view definition, that implies that you have the machinery to do a union across multiple resource types. So if you can do that, you can also do union between 2 different view definitions. And you just have to implement that outside view definition. For me, actually, I don't think it will be the same for other people, but for me, managing the row IDs and the reference and ref keys turns out to be fun from just looking at it quickly. I haven't actually implemented it yet. So we could say that it's a V2 feature and say, go ahead and implement unions of view definitions to learn what's involved.
Yeah, that could be so that could be easy answer to that question. John?
So my reaction to this is that the simpler, lighter touch, more flexible way of doing this is to add the schema inference feature to the view, to the spec, so that I can take a view definition and I can understand the resulting schema for a given view runner, and then I can do all manner of things with it. I can take that and union it with the result of other view executions, or I can make a home for it, or I can do all sorts of things. But to me, like, this feels like generic functionality, which is why I feel like we should, like, according to the sort of philosophy as possible, and we want to keep as much generic functionality out of it, because we don't need to solve problems that people have already solved. We need to solve the FHIR part, in my opinion, and sort of stay out of the other parts, unless it like adds some sort of measurable value.
And for me, that's like a fail still. So if we could not use view definition at least to shape like FHIR to a mob, then it doesn't match real world scenario. So that's my feeling.
It just doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't solve it only with view definition. We just need a little bit more, but we're going to need a lot more anyway. Definitely need version 2 for FHIR to OMOP. Because, man, we haven't started talking about the hard stuff yet.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, so as well, I have a scenario. Let's say when I was thinking about like FHIR server, and the FHIR server has a view definitions in it, and FHIR server, let's say, do replicate the view definition into some columnar databases, not like Spark or Query, but let's say in a flat columnar stuff. And the general idea that the FHIR server has a view definition and it like incrementally aggregate this data and like push it into the database. And,
Right.
And that's very valid scenario. And if I don't have the view which can combine two different resource types, then again, I fail at this quite natural scenario. Again, for me, it is very natural scenario like union medication.
You have to turn it on, right? It doesn't just exist. You have to turn it on. So there's a control point when you turn it on to say how it's going to be turned on. And that's where you do the unioning across views. But version 2 feature.
Yeah, I would also say I agree, this is like a natural feature, but I would say also join is also a natural feature. So I am guessing, I don't know OMOP too much, but I'm guessing that, when we start writing, like using view definitions to go from FHIR to OMOP, actually my guess is that, join would be one feature that would come up more frequent. And then, because of the discussions that we have had to leave join out, which I guess we don't want to repeat, I would say the same goes with it has an additional value, but it's small. And it can be easily addressed at the downstream level, like with SQL, basically. So it's basically like, the example that you are talking about is just like defining like a virtual view on top of the two tables, unioning the two. That's it.
I think a great exercise at this point is to actually attempt to implement the OMOP transformation with the V1 and to find out what that balance of stuff that we need to build on top of the view definitions look like. And then, that's sort of the area that becomes the discussion ground for future features, and maybe even multiple ways, because like there's obviously a way you would do this using something like Spark, but it could be quite different, as you point out, Nikolai, with different technologies.
Yeah, but I was thinking like from implementer's point of view, yes. And I don't see a lot of complication in implementing this feature. That's why I'm okay to like consider this feature in V1. Because it is not hard. If you implemented the REST for like SQL generation or like in memory processing, it is easy feature to implement. Yeah, you just will do the union in database, yes, or yeah, maybe in memory processing this will be a little bit more tricky, but it depends on how it's outputted, yes. So, but again, so even for ETL, it can help because it communicates intention that you want to put two streams of two different resource types into one stream. Yes, so it gives you this like direction, so it communicates intention. Otherwise you will have two views and then, okay, so we're losing this information. So we could not like communicate that essentially we designed this view for two resource types. But that's okay, I agree, it could be V2, but I just said that we always like repeat it as a mantra. From implementation point of view, I don't see that it's too complicated, the implementation. If we agree on design, I'm okay to have a V1. If everybody thinks that that's too much for V1, let's wait for V2.
Yeah, I think the streaming use case is an interesting one, and one that we haven't really talked about much. And you might be right, there might be something there, but I need to think about it a bit more, I think.
Yeah, okay, let's give it some time and maybe do discussion in Zulip. Yeah, and I think we out of time. Yeah, Max.
FHIR has expression resolved, if I remember it correctly, and looks as it might be enough for the case you mentioned with mitigation.
So we discussed that resolve is a join, and that was discussion. It was recorded, and we decided that the like joining is not in this scope, at least. Yes.
Okay.
But this is slightly different. I think this is union scenario, and yeah, if you start thinking like I will try, let's say, do the OMOP mapping for the few entities, and to show that, as we discussed at the beginning, the OMOP is a good real world case for our SQL on FHIR engine. We should be able to cover it, at least some valuable part of it. Yes, if we can, then
yeah, key mapping is what's the big thing that's going to kill us trying to get to OMOP.
Yeah,
think.
that's another problem. But I think in the MOP it's not so strict, to be honest. Yeah, because in most of cases when you're joining, you're just joining ID per ID, so there is no data type in this.
If you've got string keys in FHIR, you can't just carry those, even if you relax, OMOP's auto generation. I mean, you can change OMOP schema to be varchars for all the keys, and then just carry your FHIR IDs across. But you're altering OMOP at that point.
No, I mean, to do an OMOP conversion, you'll have to have somewhere to keep your persistent keys.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, in my implementation, I just keep a map of them, but that's well outside the SQL and FHIR spec to maintain that mapping.
Well, that's why the get reference and get resource key are abstract. You'll just have to have a special OMOP implementer that knows how to do those things.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. Okay, so we are out of time. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.